Thank you. My main challenge today was finding a way to limit the amount of material that I have to talk about. I feel like I could talk for 5 talks, so I will try to limit myself to just talking for 1. Today's talk is about the history and archaeology of ancient Pompeii. And for those of you who read the blurb that I prepared on this topic, you know that I said that large parts of the modern Bay of Naples in southern Italy, including the ancient Roman city of Pompeii, remained buried for centuries following the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 of the Common Era, or 79 AD. The archaeological remains of Pompeii have been studied and have been a site of constant scientific excavation since the late 19th century, since the late 1800s. I personally have been a member of the Pompeii Archaeological Research Project, Porta Stabia, since the 2007 summer excavation season. Our project, which goes by the acronym of PARPS, was featured on an American television channel, National Geographic, late 2 Decembers ago. And the television program's first few minutes probably will give you a better visual introduction to our site and the history of the city than I can provide. So I will ask you to watch the first 3 to 3.5 minutes of this television program.
It's a disaster of seismic proportions. A mountain erupts. Perhaps wrath from the gods. Debris and chaos rain down. Homes are destroyed. Lives cut short. The fate of over 1,000 is sealed, and their stories lost for more than 1,000 years. Now, new research reveals a hidden ancient world. We'll uncover a story never before told of the ordinary people of Pompeii and of a city buried alive. Nearly 20,000 people live in the booming town of Pompeii in AD 79. 150 miles from Rome, and 3 miles from a benign little hill called Vesuvius. It sits on the Bay of Naples, both a trade hub and popular vacation spot. The people who live here have no idea that disaster is about to strike. But in just 48 hours, their town will become both a tomb and a time capsule. For more than 200 years, archaeologists have been digging here. Where entire districts of ancient Pompeii are perfectly preserved, frozen at the moment of their destruction. Like no other site, it shows how ancient Romans lived. Works of art often focus on the rich and powerful. Furniture, paintings, even entire buildings offer a glimpse into the lives of Rome's most elite. But now, a research team reveals a different group of Pompeians. Ones often overlooked, ordinary men and women, the working class.
We've got a whole suite here of working class properties, houses and shops and workshops and all the bits and pieces that made up a working class zone in Pompeii. This has given us a fantastic and unique opportunity to look at the lives of the other 98% of the population who've been largely hidden from us for so long now.
This block is made up of stores and workshops that are also people's homes. The goal here is to figure out who these people were. In this particular building.
So I hope that video gave you some sense in action, instead of just looking at pictures, of what life might have been like in ancient Pompeii, and specifically in the city block that the project I participate in investigates. You saw this image in the video. In 79 CE, the volcano near Pompeii erupted. And this is why we know about Pompeii and why it's special today, as many of the surrounding towns. I often get asked the question when non-archaeologists find out what I do in the summers of, wait, isn't Pompeii already excavated? This gives you an idea of where Pompeii is in Italy in relation to Rome. So when I get asked, wait, isn't Pompeii already excavated? If you'll look at this map, you'll notice these blue regions here on the map. These are unexcavated regions. So everything not blue has already been excavated. But this isn't exactly what we're doing in our project. We're not excavating unexcavated areas. All of this has been excavated to the level of the volcanic eruption. However, Pompeii had been the site of inhabitation for many centuries before. And that is what our project is looking to uncover. When people look at this map, sometimes they ask, wait, why are these areas left unexcavated? And for an answer to that, recently, in late 2010, one of the excavated houses, the so-called House of the Gladiators in Pompeii, collapsed after heavy rains. And that gives you an idea of the state of preservation. The reason they won't excavate the unexcavated parts now is because they have no way of keeping what they have excavated now still standing for the long term, and this would only cause more problems down the road. This shows you a picture of the eruption path of Vesuvius, and you see Pompeii was one of the areas that received the heaviest fall of ash and coverage. Let's talk about Pompeii for a second, though. Like I said, our project is investigating the periods of occupation before the eruption. Pompeii was founded in the 7th or 6th century before the Common Era, or BC, by a people called the Oscans. It wasn't until the 1st century BC, the time right before the well-known Julius Caesar, that Pompeii was involved in the wars of Rome and ended up submitting to Rome and becoming a Roman colony. Why is it important to excavate Pompeii? What does Pompeii give us? When we think of Pompeii, many people think of the rich cultural wealth, such as art, like these wall murals, and the beautiful frescoes that can be found in Pompeii and the surrounding areas. However, many people first think of, when they hear Pompeii, they think of the plaster casts of bodies of people buried in the volcanic eruption. This is a copy of a plaster cast. So for those of you who do not know, people were buried, they were first suffocated by the hot gases released by the volcanic eruption. They were not buried alive. They were suffocated first, and then the ash fell down around them and compacted around their bodies. And over the centuries, that ash and volcanic fallout hardened around the bodies, and when the bodies decomposed, they left cavities, empty spaces. When archaeologists first started excavating Pompeii, they found these empty places and poured plaster into them, and then excavated around them, and they discovered the shape of these bodies where they fell. Here's another one, clearly a small child. This is the one question you get asked the most when you're in Pompeii, obviously working. Even though I'm not a tour guide or someone who is working to show people where to go, people still recognize you as working there in an official capacity and approach you with questions. The number one question you get asked is, where are the bodies? People want to see the bodies. And here are casts of bodies that are in situ, or in the place where they fell. The other ones I showed you were plaster casts in museums. But these contain the actual bones of the people who died there. And this captures their moment of death. I've always found this image, or this plaster cast, to be the most poignant of the ones. And one of the reasons that I sometimes I'm not always thrilled to answer the question of where are the bodies, because I feel that the bodies on display in Pompeii, it's not the same thing as looking at an Egyptian mummy or something similar. A person who has died and their body has been taken care of and put to rest. These plaster casts capture not just a person's body, but their moment of death. And I think we can all look at this image and feel the fear and terror that this person must have felt being trapped in a volcanic eruption, not understanding what was happening or why it was happening, and ultimately dying. It wasn't just people who could not escape the volcanic eruption, though. Here you see, this is a plaster cast of a pig that was caught in the volcanic eruption. And we know this is not a copy of the plaster cast, but the original, because sometimes you see the actual bones in the original plaster cast sticking out from where the plaster is not present. Also, here's a plaster cast of a dog who was caught in the volcanic eruption. And here is a horse or mule skeleton that worked in a bakery, turning the mill to grind grain. Other things that Pompeii and the surrounding areas offer is, at Herculaneum, the destruction was slightly different. We get actual wood preserved from 2,000 years ago. In Pompeii, we even get things such as graffiti. This is in a house in Pompeii, and you can't see it here, but when I zoom in, here's a Latin graffito that I used to show my American high school Latin students to show them that even Romans sometimes got their grammar wrong. This says, balneus lavatur, the bathroom is clean. It should be balneum lavatur. They got the grammatical gender wrong, for those of you who know about grammatical gender in Romance languages. There are other aspects of Pompeii's daily life that were preserved that make this an important site for us and a rich treasure of cultural history. For example, there was an election going on in Pompeii during the destruction, and we see that people would put election graffiti on the walls around town to support the candidates, similar to signs in Americans' yards during election years. And one further example of graffiti is this tomb outside of the Porta Stabia, our gate, that when you zoom in, you see that someone has written, and so this is actual Roman handwriting, and you can see how difficult it would be to read. And someone has come along and scratched part of it out and written their own language, or written their own message. One final, or maybe not final, one other example of the cultural history of Pompeii is you have monumental architecture, such as the Amphitheater, where gladiators would fight. Such as this gladiator, my friend Rufus. He's ready to fight in the Amphitheater. And you learn about Roman daily life, things that we would otherwise only know from books, from literature. This is an example of what's called a lararium painting that tells us about Roman daily religion. Let me move forward, though. So, again, this is the map of Pompeii. The area where we work is right here. This is the Porta Stabia, the gate to the nearby town of Stabia. And the project began in 2005, working on this side of the street in this city block, what's known in Latin as an insula, or island, is what they called their city blocks. In 2010, for the past 2 seasons, we moved across the street to the other side of the block to investigate. Here's a close-up map to show you our area of excavation. Here is the gate. Here is where the first 5 seasons of excavation took place in this insula, and then across the street for the next, for 2010, 2011, and going forward. Here's an aerial view of what it looks like. Let's zoom down to the ground level. This is what our block looks like. This is what our block looks like today. So you can see the gate and compare that with, from the same television program I showed you the introduction of, this computer recreation of the same city block looking out the gate. This is something like what it would have looked like in Roman times, and this is what it looks like today. This is the modern town of Pompeii, the piazza, the town square. So that's where we work. But what do we do? What do archaeologists do? Well, everyone knows who watches the movies that archaeologists are primarily concerned with fighting Nazis and recovering valuable biblical artifacts. But that's not what I do. I want to focus this presentation not just on the big picture things, but to give you my perspective on daily life as a Roman archaeologist. So our project is extremely fortunate in that we are very well funded, and we live in relative luxury compared to some archaeological projects that live in tents and only get to shower infrequently. We live in very nice apartments outside of the main part of modern Pompeii. This is a view from our back balcony, and you can see Vesuvius looming in the distance. Here's an example of our bedrooms. We live in somewhat cramped conditions, 6 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, but again, it's still relatively speaking luxury for archaeological excavations. So each day we get up and we have about a 50 or 60-minute walk to work. So here we are walking to work down the Via Arapaya, just a street that leads down to our apartment. We go through the piazza, and then we get back to our site where we prepare for the day. Just a quick aside, you will see many pictures of dogs in this picture. This is because Pompeii has become a place in the surrounding area for dog owners to abandon unwanted dogs. And because they know that the dogs have shelter in the ancient city and that tourists will feed the dogs. So when someone owns a dog and doesn't want it anymore, they drive it to Pompeii, push the dog out of the car, and there it stays. Bad for the dogs, but good for us. We have friends every year. The dogs remember us from year to year and are very excited when we return. It's actually the dogs that adopt the people and not the other way around. They have a core pack, and of course they all have names, but I won't bore you with those details now. After we congregate and play with the dogs until 8 o'clock comes around, we go up the hill, a 5-minute walk to one of the larger houses in Pompeii, near our work site, and we have a storeroom in the back there of this house where we keep our equipment for security purposes, so our equipment doesn't go missing. So each day, we go to the storeroom, grab our stuff, and march back down. We set up things like the big sifter, which you saw in action in the brief video clip. One of the interesting things about excavating in Pompeii versus some archaeological excavations is you're really working in a fishbowl, particularly in the area that we work in. Off this way and then back towards us is one of the main tourist entrances for the city. So there are millions of visitors to Pompeii every year. During our excavations, we are the first or second thing that many of these tourists see. So we have tourists congregating at the gate every day, taking pictures, and sometimes deciding to step over the gate to get a closer look. And we have to tell them to go back. This is a picture of me taking a picture of tourists taking a picture of me. There are several parts to the day that are very important. So we work hard, and I'll show you pictures of us being very dirty. It is southern Italy. The excavation season is in July, and the hottest part of the year. So one of the things that is actually important is cookie break time. We start work at 8 o'clock, and at 10:30 every day, we find some shade and eat something salty and sweet to replenish all of the salts that we sweat out during the day. Another part of the regular process of excavating in our project is, although there are multiple trenches of excavation, we're still one big project. And to keep that feeling, each week we have a trench tour at the beginning of the week where all the other trenches come by and find out what's happening in your trench. I'll talk more about the iPads in a minute, but starting last year, we began filming our trench tours with iPads. Also, again, more dogs. Part of the regular cycle, the daily routine is catching a little bit of a nap when you can in the shade, sometimes with dogs. So I would like to take this point to tell you about the sort of daily realities of excavation. So how do you get the dirt out of the ground and find out what's there? Our primary tool of excavation is the trowel. For those of you who don't know what a trowel is, it's similar to the tool that someone who lays bricks would use, sort of a flat shovel type tool. So you trowel the dirt into a dustpan, put the dirt into a bucket, so it's a very slow, painstaking process. And then, as you saw before, when the bucket is full, you pour it into the sifter, sift through it, and see what's in there. Most of the time, what's in there is rocks and junk, not stuff that you really want to keep for any reason. But when you find something, I'll talk more about this in a second, we have a system of cataloging and keeping track of what we find. And each thing has to go in a specific tray. If you like it, then you should put a tag on it. So our system involves keeping track of everything that we find. This involves, if you see this number right here, allow me to talk for just a minute about something called an SU, which is a stratigraphic unit. So everything that we find has its own number. The first two numbers refer to what trench it comes from. So just looking at that one number, you know where it came from and its own number. So trench 25, item 55. We also catalog what season, the date, and what it is. The important thing to understand here is that archaeology is a destructive process. By digging this stuff out of the ground, by removing these artifacts, you are destroying the context. No one can ever go back and dig that place again. Once you have done that, you've destroyed the information that can be gained by doing that. So we have a responsibility to keep as careful and as detailed records as we can, because by digging, we're destroying. So we have to record all the information. This includes not only two-dimensional space, which you'll see in a minute, but also three-dimensional space. So we use surveyor's equipment to find out where things are not only on a two-dimensional map-like level, but in three-dimensional space as well. One of the tools that our project is fortunate to have is called a total station. This is a very expensive piece of equipment that shoots a laser beam out at something and it bounces back, and this machine knows exactly where it is in three-dimensional space and where that point is. And you shoot a series of points with the laser, the machine calculates it, and comes up with a three-dimensional model of whatever you shot. So very, very good for what we do. And here's an example of the total station even on top of the gate. Some of the pitfalls we run into, though, in a site that's been continuously excavated and a major tourist attraction for 200 years, more than 200 years, we get stuff like this. So this is utility pipes that we didn't know were there until we started excavating. And then, when you come down on this, the Romans did not have PVC. This is obviously from the last century, so what we would call modern. So, if you think about it logically, in order for this to get here, everything on top of it would have to be removed. That means, anything around here or above here, now that the information you have gained from that is now worthless. So when you find something like this, it's not a happy moment. It means everything above that is not ancient, and the information tells you nothing. This was from my trench last year. The previous year, we found this. These are not Roman tiles. These were tiles covering up a very not Roman electrical cable that at one time provided lighting for this part of the site in the early 1900s. So this means everything around here can't tell you anything now. Back to the sort of daily cycle of what we do. Okay, so you dig everything up, you give everything a number, but you have a bunch of stuff that's been in the ground for centuries, for millennia. You have to clean it. So when we close a stratigraphic unit, an SU, we take all the associated pottery back to a kind of shady place, get water, get toothbrushes, and painstakingly wash all the pottery. But that's not where it ends for the pottery. In order for the pottery to tell us anything, we have to sort it by type. So we have specialists, such as Paula here, who come to help us with what pottery is what. Non-specialists aren't always the best at this. And then we go up to our storeroom area and count it, weigh it, and record all the data. Also involved in this meticulous recording is photographing everything that we find. One of the things that sometimes causes me the most headaches is you must make everything look clean for the photograph, but it's dirt. So sometimes you're being asked to make dirt look clean, which is sometimes as infuriating as it sounds. Again, this is more of what I was talking about earlier, where you plot everything in three-dimensional space to know exactly where everything was. I'll try to hurry through this to get to the what's the cool stuff you found section while we still have time. But this is illustrating the importance of when you do take photos, you need to either have full shade or full sun, because if it looks like this, you can't tell what it is. So sometimes you are racing to beat the sun before it moves. Or you can create your own shade. You can use something called a shade type. Let me just go through all this. This is one more example of something that we do. Even the stuff that's not pottery, the stuff that's just brick or mortar or junk that doesn't mean anything, if it's man-made, we still keep track of how much there was. We don't keep it, we throw it away, but we still want to know how much there was. So this was me in the middle of counting what we call building materials when the dogs can be awesome, but sometimes they come and sit right on what you're wanting to work on, and it's hard to tell them to go away. It's not all glamorous. Sometimes you spend 2 days upside down with your head in a hole. This was to collect soil from a drain. This is another example of collecting soil from a drain, because we have an entire team of people that look at things like bones and fish scales and seeds that come out of drains. That these people can tell us what the Romans were eating, what the people who lived in Pompeii were eating, what their lifestyle was like. So they use a special water sifting flotation device, and then spend days with tweezers, going blind, and going through things like fish scales and seeds. I included this to just briefly show you an example of what we're trying to accomplish. So archaeology is all about creating relationships between things in the order that they happened. What came first? What came later? So here's the same picture blown up a little bigger. These are where two walls meet. So this is just a snapshot of what we do in archaeology. Just an example on the sort of three-dimensional plane, where normally we're doing it in 2 dimensions. So looking at these two walls, we have to ask ourselves which wall came first, or were they built together at the same time? If you'll notice, this wall has a plaster covering on it that, as you can see here, goes behind. So we know that this wall was first, this wall was built second, and built against there, because the plaster continues on behind the other wall. This is just an example, just a snapshot of the chronological sequencing that we do in archaeology. Moving forward quickly, we used to have to do all of this with paper. We had forms such as this: front side, back side, fill all this out by hand. A real pain. And then technology came along. PARPS, the project that I'm associated with, is the first project to do completely paperless archaeology. We record all of our data using Apple iPads. It's recorded in real time on the iPad, and it is then all of the information from all of the trenches are synced twice a day. Once during lunch, so that everyone knows what everyone has found. It's right there at your fingertips from the morning, and then at home in the evening after work. It's synced again. So twice a day, all of our information from the entire site is synced in real time. So now we get to look at things like this. These are the sort of drawings that we make. This is the old way of doing it. Not much fun. But now we end up with stuff like this, just using the iPad. Just several examples of the sort of nice looking things that we get with technology. It's colored, it's easy to read, you're not reading someone's handwriting. It's just so much nicer. Same thing with walls. We used to have to record the walls like this, taking measurements, and then someone is here with a gridded board, plotting points and connecting the dots. Not fun. Now, we use a digital camera with a level to make sure you're on a vertical plane, take a picture, import it into the iPad, and then you just use a drawing program to tell you what's going on with this wall. So you still do this by hand, but it's much, much simpler and more accurate. So you save time and gain accuracy. And here's another example of a wall drawing. I won't bore you with this now. Let's move forward quickly, as I want to speak for about 5 more minutes before I open up the floor to questions. I'm sure you're all growing tired of listening to me talk. So moving forward quickly, so where does all this stuff go? We have a big building on site that the Italians call La Monstra, the monster. It's not a pretty looking building, as you would imagine, but it has a lot of space. So you walk in, and here's everything. Here's all the stuff. And that's where it sits. Occasionally you find fun stuff in the monster to take pictures of, and some of you might remember my referencing the Indiana Jones movie earlier, and recognize this clip as well, from the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when you wonder where the Ark has gone, and they have top people looking at it. It's similar. This is where the stuff that we found goes, and this is pretty much where it will stay. The history of archaeology in the Mediterranean world, in Italy, Greece, Egypt, Turkey, these places, has been one of Western European countries coming in and taking their stuff. So now they won't let anything go. So this is where stuff stays. So at the end of 5 weeks, you end up with this. What do you do with this? It's all got to go back in the hole. So 5 weeks you spend excavating all these tons of dirt, this much dirt, painstakingly like this, and in one day it all has to go back. The first thing, we call this backfill day. The first thing you do is throw plastic into the holes at the bottom so that in the future, if someone comes and excavates this again, they'll find the plastic and realize, nope, it's modern. And this is what you look like after backfill. It's the longest, sweatiest, dirtiest day of your life. Quickly, what cool stuff do you find? We do not find this. We are excavating the layers before the eruption. So we're looking at basically people's trash. Essentially, sometimes though, we do find cool stuff. Do you remember this place, the Amphitheater? Do you remember these people, the science team? Well, there was one finding the year before I joined the excavation where in the amphitheater, not only would gladiators, would people fight people, but sometimes people would fight animals, exotic animals. We have many, many written records from the Roman era, and we know a lot of things. One thing we don't know is what happened to the meat. What happened to the elephants and the lions that were killed in the arena? We have no record of that. But one of the things we found in a drain in our block was a giraffe bone. Giraffes are not native to Italy. The giraffe bone had been butchered. So someone had found giraffe meat and eaten it. So likely, the giraffe was killed in the amphitheater, and in some way, it was made available to the public, and someone ate it. Everyone likes coins. We find a ton of coins. There's a close-up of it. It's rare that you can read the coin when it comes out of the ground, but you can read this one. We find sometimes stuff like this. This is one of the things that I'm always impressed to look back at my pictures, that something like this die from 2,000 years ago looks exactly like something you would buy from a store today. We find engraved gemstones, Intaglio. I won't bother explaining this. Things like loom weights. So in a loom, when you're weaving, you need to weight the threads. So we find many of these. Here's a perfume bottle. Here's some paint pigment. Somebody was painting, and they dropped the jar in a hole, and there it stayed. And I'll just skip ahead from all this and finish up here. Oh, sometimes we have famous visitors. You might recognize this guy. This is Bradley Cooper, an American movie star, and here's Leonardo DiCaprio and Bradley Cooper. They visited our site last summer. Here's the team, and I want to thank all of you for being here, and I want to thank the Pompeii Archaeological Research Project in Porta Stabia, and Dr. Stephen Ellis, whom you saw briefly on the video. He was the gentleman with the Australian accent who was talking about Pompeii. It's a wonderful experience. I hope I haven't bored you too much. I just have a lot to say about it, and thank you for your time.